Hi everyone. Let's talk a moment about academic integrity, avoiding plagiarism, and APA referencing style. Plagiarism means academic dishonesty has occurred. Students must not reproduce the ideas, the words, the statements, or work of others without giving credit for using such information. The way you give credit is through the use of citations, and citations must be used when quoting written or oral words of others, when paraphrasing written or oral words of others, when using the ideas, opinions, or theory of others, or when borrowing facts, statistics, or illustrative materials of others. There is an exception. If the information is considered common knowledge, then there's no reason for a citation. And my understanding of what is common knowledge is if it is something that an average fifth grader would know. For instance, President Lincoln was the 16th President of the United States. That would not require a citation because most fifth graders would be able to answer that question. There are two ways to avoid plagiarism: quoting and paraphrasing. Quoting is the idea of using word-for-word excerpts, and they must be enclosed in quotation marks even if there's only 2 or 3 words when those words are significant identifiers of another's idea. I would use the general rule of thumb that once you've exceeded using 3 words of someone else's work, it needs a quote. Now, I would also quote 3 words if they are significant identifiers of another's ideas, meaning if those words really are the significant point of what the author was presenting. When you do quoting, you must use citations in the form of in-text parenthetical references to the author of the work. The other way to avoid plagiarism involves paraphrasing, which means presenting the ideas of another, but presenting it using your own words. And here too, citations are required. Let's go through some examples. First, we'll try out paraphrasing. The original source read, "Readers of history textbooks usually conclude that Lincoln was a great president." And the student paraphrased this by saying, "Those that read history textbooks usually think Lincoln was a grand president." Is this plagiarism? It is. The sentence structure and wording are nearly identical to the original author, and there was no credit given in the form of a citation to the original author. Alright, now let's try paraphrasing with a citation. We'll use the same quote. "Readers of history textbooks usually conclude that Lincoln was a great president." And the student attempts this by writing, "Those that read history textbooks usually think Lincoln was a grand president." And then using proper in-text referencing, we put in the author's name and the year in this case, in quotes. Does this involve plagiarism? And again, the answer is yes, because the sentence structure and the wording is still nearly identical to the original author's wording. The reader assumes that this was paraphrased in the student's own writing, but we know it really still is in the writing of the originator. Okay, now let's take a look at example 3, where we've got a quotation with a citation. The original idea, or the original writing, was, "Readers of history textbooks usually conclude that Lincoln was a great president." Now the student has wrote, "Those that read, quote, history textbooks usually conclude, 3 ellipses, Lincoln was a great president," end quote, and then the citation appears. Now in this case, has there been plagiarism? And the answer is no. The sentence appears in quotes, he's quoted the correct words, and it's properly cited. It's properly cited. Now the ellipses are an okay technique to use when you want to leave out words from the original writer that you're quoting, but those words do not change the meaning and are not critical to the points you want to make. So in our case, we've used the ellipses rather than quoting the word that, but it could have been a whole phrase or perhaps a whole sentence or more. All right, let's try another example. Again, with paraphrase, quote, and a citation. The original idea, or the original work, read, "Readers of history textbooks usually conclude that Lincoln was a great president." And the student wrote, "Those that read, quote, history textbooks, end quote, typically think, quote, Lincoln was a great president, end quote," and then the citation in parentheses. Is this plagiarism? No, this is fine. The original words of the author appear in quotes, and the full sentence represents the author's work is properly cited. Now let's look at example 5, where we've got a paraphrase situation and a citation. Again, the original writing was, "Readers of history textbooks usually conclude that Lincoln was a great president." And the student on this attempt writes, "Readers of textbooks that primarily discuss historical events are most likely to believe that Abe Lincoln was one of our nation's greatest presidents." And then we put the citation in parenthetically. Is this plagiarism? No, this is fine. The original idea has been successfully paraphrased and the work is properly cited. The student's words are truly his or her own, but the ideas of the originator are still presented. Now let's talk a little bit about APA citation reference style, or APA reference style. APA is one style of many used for citing sources, which means to give credit. It's a standardized approach for documenting sources for written assignments, and it permits proper citation, which avoids plagiarism. Now, there's two main areas of APA citation reference style, or APA reference style. In-text citations, they're required. They involve giving credit directly after the words or ideas of others have been introduced. They appear parenthetically in the main body of the writing. They're presented immediately after the words or ideas of others appear in the writing. For long quotes, you can introduce the quote, such as, "Jones's 2002 study showed that, colon," and after that, then you can indent the quoted material, but you wouldn't need to put it in quotes. Presenting this long quote style is appropriate for quotes of approximately 40 words or longer. For further information on various rules relating to in-text citations, see the instructor files, and I would take a look at the library APA citation guide for more specific rules on proper in-text citation and formatting. The second area of the APA reference style is called the reference list. The reference list appears at the end of the writing. It appears with a title called references. The word references should appear. And typically an author's last name appears first. Now there's many other rules that relate to the proper formatting of what appears in the reference list at the end of a writing. And I encourage you again to look at the library APA citation guide, which is in the instructor files of our course, for more specific reference list formatting rules. Okay, thank you everyone. That's what I wanted to cover in this brief presentation.